I sold my patent for $17 million, then saw my husband slip poison into my glass. So I made him pay. My name is Iris, and I am 34 years old. The day I signed that contract was supposed to be the happiest moment of my entire life. 7 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and finally my hard work had paid off beyond my wildest dreams. I had a beautiful home, a successful career, and a husband who I believed loved me unconditionally. But there were things happening right under my own roof that I never could have imagined. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe so you do not miss a single moment of this story. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I have always been fascinated by the human heart. Not in the romantic sense, though I suppose that matters too, but in the scientific one. The way it beats over 100,000 times a day, pumping blood through 60,000 miles of vessels, keeping us alive without us ever having to think about it. That fascination led me to become a biomedical engineer, and eventually it led me to Boston, where I joined one of the top medical device research companies in the country. For 7 years, I dedicated myself to my work. I arrived at the lab before sunrise and often stayed long after everyone else had gone home. My specialty was cardiac implants, those tiny devices that help failing hearts keep beating. The technology was good, but I knew it could be better, smaller, more affordable, accessible to patients who could never dream of affording the current options on the market. So I started my own project on the side. Nights, weekends, holidays. I used my own savings to fund the research, my own equipment purchased, piece by piece. I did not want any questions about ownership. This was mine. Every calculation, every prototype, every failure and breakthrough belonged to me and me alone. After 4 years of independent work, I finally did it. I created a cardiac implant that was 30% smaller than anything else available, cost half as much to manufacture, and had a battery life twice as long as the leading competitor. I filed for a patent under my own name, and when it was approved, I knew my life was about to change. But let me tell you about Nathan, because understanding him is essential to understanding everything that came after. I met Nathan at a medical technology conference 6 years ago. He was working as a financial consultant specializing in healthcare investments, and he approached me during a coffee break to ask about my research. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, tall with warm brown eyes and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He asked intelligent questions. He remembered details. He made me laugh. We exchanged business cards that day, and he called me 3 days later to ask if I wanted to get dinner. I said yes. That dinner turned into another, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. He understood my work in a way no one else did. He encouraged me, celebrated my small victories, and held me when experiments failed. After 2 years of dating, he proposed on a beach in Maine, the sun setting behind us, and I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small but beautiful, just close friends and family at a vineyard in Napa Valley. My mother cried. His father gave a toast about how lucky Nathan was to have found someone so brilliant and beautiful. I believed every word. We bought a house in the suburbs of Boston, a charming colonial with a big backyard and a kitchen that got perfect morning light. Nathan insisted on handling our finances, since that was his expertise after all. I was happy to let him. Numbers and investments bored me. I wanted to focus on my research, and he seemed content to manage everything else. Our life together was exactly what I had always dreamed of. Sunday morning pancakes, long walks through the neighborhood in autumn when the leaves turned golden and red. Quiet evenings on the couch, my feet in his lap while I read research papers, and he scrolled through financial reports. He would bring me coffee in bed some mornings, kiss my forehead, and tell me he was proud of me. I thought I knew what love was. I thought I had found my person, my partner, my forever. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was, how desperately I wanted to believe in the fairy tale that I ignored every warning sign, every moment of hesitation, every tiny voice in the back of my mind that whispered something was not quite right. But we will get to that. First, let me tell you about the day everything changed. The offer came in January during one of the coldest winters Boston had seen in decades. A major pharmaceutical corporation had been watching my patent with interest, and their acquisition team reached out to discuss a potential purchase. The number they mentioned on that first call made me drop my phone. $17 million. I did not believe it at first. I asked them to repeat it. Then I asked them to send it in writing. When the email arrived with the official letter of intent, I sat at my desk and stared at the screen for 15 minutes without moving. This was more money than I had ever dreamed of, more than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined, more than I could ever spend. The negotiation process took 3 months. I hired my own lawyer, a woman named Victoria Palmer, who came highly recommended by a colleague. She was sharp, meticulous, and absolutely ruthless in protecting my interests. Together, we went through every clause, every condition, every comma in that contract until we were satisfied that this deal was everything it should be. Throughout those 3 months, Nathan was my biggest supporter, or so I thought. He would ask about the negotiations every evening, wanting to know every detail. How much were they offering now? What terms were they proposing? When would the money transfer? I told him everything because I trusted him completely. He was my husband. Why would I keep secrets from him? The day I signed the contract was March 15th. I remember the date because it was the IDs of March, and my lawyer joked that I should beware. I laughed. What could possibly go wrong? The signing took place in a sleek conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown skyscraper. The view of Boston Harbor was spectacular, but I barely noticed it. My hands were shaking as I picked up the pen. I signed my name on page after page, initialing here, dating there, until finally it was done. The CEO of the pharmaceutical company shook my hand, congratulated me, and told me the funds would be transferred within 48 hours. I walked out of that building feeling like I was floating. I called Nathan immediately. "Honey, I did it?" I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "It is done. $17 million. He whooped so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Baby, that is incredible," he said. "I am so proud of you. We have to celebrate. I am going to make the most amazing dinner tonight. Just come home, okay? Come home and let me take care of everything." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. I told him I loved him and that I would be home in an hour, but I got home early. The traffic was lighter than expected, and I was so eager to see Nathan that I may have driven a little faster than usual. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the lights were on in the kitchen. He was already preparing our celebration dinner. I decided to surprise him. Instead of going through the front door, I slipped around to the back of the house and entered through the mudroom. The kitchen was connected to the living room by a frosted glass partition, and I could see Nathan moving around on the other side. I was about to call out to him when something stopped me. He was standing at the dining table where 2 glasses of red wine had already been poured. As I watched through the frosted glass, I saw him reach into his jacket pocket and pull out a small bottle. He uncapped it, tilted it over one of the glasses, and let several drops fall into the wine. My heart stopped. Literally stopped. For one terrible moment, I forgot how to breathe. I watched as Nathan recapped the bottle, slipped it back into his pocket, and then picked up a small spoon to stir the wine. He held the glass up to the light, examined it carefully, and then set it back down on the table. On my side of the table, in my spot, my legs went weak. I grabbed the wall to keep from falling. This could not be happening. This could not be real. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a supplement. Maybe it was some kind of surprise like those fizzy tablets that change the color of drinks. Maybe I was seeing things. But I knew. Deep in my gut, in a place that had been trying to warn me for longer than I wanted to admit, I knew exactly what I had just witnessed. My husband had just put something in my drink, something he did not want me to know about. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. Every instinct screamed at me to run in there, to confront him, to demand an explanation. But something held me back. Call it survival instinct. Call it the logical part of my brain that had spent years approaching problems methodically and carefully. If I confronted him now, what would happen? He would deny it. He would make up some excuse. And if whatever was in that bottle was what I feared it might be, then I would be tipping off a man who wanted to hurt me. A man who might try again more carefully next time when I would not be watching. I needed to be smart. I needed to be strategic. I needed to pretend I had seen nothing. I backed out of the mudroom as quietly as I had entered. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the door handle. I walked around to the front of the house, took several deep breaths to steady myself, and then opened the front door with all the enthusiasm I could fake. "Nathan," I called out, my voice only trembling slightly. "I am home." He appeared from the kitchen with a radiant smile, arms outstretched. "There is my genius wife," he said, pulling me into a hug. $17 million. I still cannot believe it. I hugged him back, trying not to stiffen, trying not to let him feel my racing heart. "Neither can I whispered. He led me to the dining table where candles were lit and soft music was playing. "See?" he said, gesturing to the wine glasses. "I thought we would start with your favorite red." I looked at the glass in my spot, the glass that now contained something other than wine. My stomach churned. "That is so thoughtful," I said. "But actually, would you mind if we held off on the wine for now? I have had such an intense day, and I have a splitting headache. I think I just need to lie down for a bit." Nathan's smile flickered just for a moment so quickly I might have imagined it. But I did not imagine it. I saw it. A flash of frustration, maybe even anger before his concerned husband mask slipped back into place. "Of course, baby," he said. "You go rest. The wine will still be here when you feel better." I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat on the floor with my back against the door. For 10 minutes, I did not move. I just sat there trying to process what I had seen, trying to figure out what to do next. When I finally came back downstairs, Nathan was in the kitchen cleaning up. I told him I was going to get some fresh air on the back porch. He nodded his back to me, and I used those few moments alone to move to the dining table. My glass was still there. I picked it up carefully, tilted it slightly, and poured most of the contents into a small travel bottle I kept in my purse for hand sanitizer. Then I rinsed my glass in the kitchen sink when Nathan stepped out to use the bathroom, refilled it with wine directly from the bottle, and returned to my seat as if nothing had happened. I had evidence now. Whatever was in that bottle, I was going to find out. I did not sleep that night. I lay beside Nathan in the darkness, listening to his breathing, wondering how I could ever have believed I knew this man. Every time he shifted in his sleep, I flinched. Every time his arm brushed against mine, I wanted to scream. How long had he been planning this? Was this the first time he had tried to poison me, or had there been others I did not notice? What was in that bottle? What would it have done to me? By morning, I had a plan. I waited until Nathan left for work, then I pulled out my laptop and searched for private investigators in the Boston area. I needed someone discreet, someone experienced, someone who would not ask too many questions. After an hour of research, I settled on a woman named Margaret Chen. Her website was minimal, but her credentials were impressive. Former Boston PD detective, 22 years on the force before starting her own firm. She specialized in domestic cases, which I supposed was exactly what this was. I called her office and made an appointment for that afternoon. Margaret Chen operated out of a small office above a dry cleaning shop in Chinatown. She was not what I expected. Petite, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun, she had the kind of face that made you want to trust her immediately. Her office was sparse but organized, with filing cabinets lining the walls and a single orchid on her desk. I sat across from her and told her everything. The patent sale, the celebration dinner, what I had seen Nathan do to my wine. As I spoke, I pulled the small bottle from my purse and set it on her desk. "I need to know what this is," I said, "and I need to know why my husband would put it in my drink." Margaret did not react with shock or disbelief. She just nodded, made notes, and asked clarifying questions. "How long have you been married? Does your husband have access to your finances? Have you noticed any other unusual behavior?" I answered as best I could, though the answers were not comforting. Yes, Nathan had complete access to our finances. No, I had not noticed anything unusual. Yes, I had told him everything about the patent sale. When I finished, Margaret leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. I am going to be honest with you, Mrs. Walsh. What you are describing is potentially attempted murder. If this substance turns out to be what you fear, you need to be very careful. Your husband cannot know that you are onto him. I know, I said. That is why I need your help. She nodded. Here is what we are going to do. I have a contact at a private lab who can analyze this sample within 48 hours. In the meantime, I am going to start looking into your husband's background. Financials, known associates, anything that might explain why he would do this. You are going to go home and act completely normal. Can you do that? I thought about sleeping next to a man who wanted me dead. I thought about smiling at him over breakfast, kissing him goodbye, pretending our life was exactly what it had always been. Yes, I said, I can do that. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my daily routine, but everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. Nathan was attentive, loving, the perfect husband. He brought me coffee in bed. He asked about my headache. He suggested we reschedule our celebration dinner for the weekend. I smiled. I nodded. I died a little more inside with every passing hour. When Margaret called on the third day, I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, the only place I felt safe enough to take the call. I have the results, she said. Her voice was grim. The substance in your wine was a cardiac glycoside. In small doses over time, it causes gradual heart failure. The symptoms would look natural, especially in someone who works long hours under high stress. A doctor might diagnose it as stress-induced cardiomyopathy. There would be no reason to suspect foul play. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. He was trying to make it look like I died of a heart attack. Yes, Margaret said. And if you had not seen him that night, you probably would have. A sob escaped my throat. The man I loved, the man I had shared my life with for 6 years, was systematically trying to murder me. And he was doing it in a way that would leave no evidence, no suspicion, nothing. Margaret, I whispered, what do I do? You stay calm, she said, and you let me dig deeper. There is a reason your husband wants you dead, Mrs. Walsh. I am going to find out what it is. Over the next week, Margaret uncovered the truth piece by devastating piece. Each phone call brought new revelations, and each revelation broke something inside me that I did not know could still break. The first call came on a Monday afternoon. Your husband has a gambling problem, Margaret said without preamble. A serious one. He has been placing bets through offshore accounts for at least 4 years, maybe longer. Based on what I have found, his total debt is somewhere around $1.8 million. I sank onto my couch, the phone pressed to my ear. $1.8 million. That was impossible. Nathan was a financial consultant. He was supposed to be good with money. It gets worse, Margaret continued. He has been using your assets to cover some of his losses. He took out a second mortgage on your house without your knowledge, forged your signature on the paperwork. He has also maxed out 3 credit cards in your name. I felt sick. How did I not know? How did I not see the statements, the bills, the warning signs? Because he intercepted them, Margaret said. Reading my thoughts. All your financial correspondence has been redirected to a P.O. box registered in his name. You never saw any of it because he made sure you would not. The second call came 3 days later. I have been following your husband, Margaret said. He has a girlfriend. Of course he did. At this point, nothing could surprise me anymore. Who is she? Her name is Veronica Hale, 30 years old. She works as a hostess at a casino in Connecticut. Based on my surveillance, they have been involved for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Margaret sent me photographs. Nathan and a woman with platinum blonde hair and red lipstick walking hand in hand through a hotel lobby. Nathan and the same woman kissing in a parked car. Nathan and the woman checking into a room together at a motel off the interstate. But here is the part you really need to hear. Margaret said, I managed to access some of his text messages. There is a conversation between him and this Veronica from the night of your celebration dinner. She texted him asking, and I quote, "Is it done yet?" He responded that you were not feeling well and did not drink the wine, but he would try again soon. I stared at the photographs on my phone. The woman who knew my husband was trying to kill me. The woman who was waiting for him to finish the job so they could be together. She is part of this, I said. She knows. She is absolutely part of this. Margaret confirmed. They are planning to take your money and disappear together once you are out of the picture. The full scope of Nathan's plan became clear over the following days. Margaret compiled everything into a report that read like a horror novel. Step 1. Poison his wife slowly using a cardiac glycoside that would mimic natural heart failure. Step 2. Inherit all her assets, including the $17 million from the patent sale. Step 3. Pay off his gambling debts. Step 4. Sell the house and any remaining assets. Step 5. Disappear with his mistress to somewhere without extradition treaties. He had been researching the poison for months, Margaret told me. He found a supplier through dark web connections, someone who sells to people who do not want to be traced. He studied the symptoms, the dosing, the timeline. He wanted it to look natural because a murder investigation would complicate the inheritance. I sat in my car parked in the same grocery store lot where I had taken the first call, and I read through the report 3 times. The man I had married had spent months planning my death. He had researched how to kill me without getting caught. He had recruited his mistress to help, and all the while he had kissed me goodnight and told me he loved me. I cried until I had no tears left. Then I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and made a decision. Nathan wanted to play this game. Fine, I would play, but I would win. Victoria Palmer was exactly the kind of lawyer you want in your corner when your life has fallen apart. Tall, commanding, with natural hair cropped close to her head and eyes that missed nothing, she had a reputation for being absolutely merciless in the courtroom. When I walked into her office and laid out everything Margaret had discovered, she listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You have 2 options," she finally said. "You can go to the police right now with what you have. They will arrest your husband and this will all be over. Or," she paused, letting the word hang in the air, "or we can be strategic about this. Build an airtight case. Protect your assets. Make sure that when this goes to trial, there is absolutely no chance he walks away." "What would strategic look like?" I asked. She leaned forward. "First, we protect your money. That $17 million is yours. But if Nathan finds out you are on to him, before we are ready, he might try to drain whatever accounts he can access. We need to move fast and quiet." Within 48 hours, Victoria had helped me open new accounts at a different bank, transfer the patent money to a trust that Nathan had no access to, and quietly change my will. Nathan had been my sole beneficiary. Now everything would go to a cardiac research foundation I had long admired, with a secondary bequest to my younger sister, Sophie. Good, Victoria said when the paperwork was complete. Now we gather evidence. I had already started. With Margaret's guidance, I installed small cameras in the kitchen and living room, hidden among the decorations Nathan never paid attention to. I watched the footage on my laptop at work, reviewing each day's recordings with a sick feeling in my stomach. Nathan did not try to poison me again immediately. For the first week after my celebration dinner, he seemed to be waiting, perhaps worried that I might be suspicious. But gradually, he grew confident again. I caught him on camera 7 times over the next 2 weeks. Once adding drops to my morning coffee, twice putting something in my evening tea, 4 times contaminating food he had prepared, stirring the powder into soup or sprinkling it over a salad. Each time I disposed of whatever he had tampered with when he was not looking. I poured coffee down the drain. I scraped contaminated food into the garbage disposal. I did it all with a smile on my face and murder in my heart. 7 documented attempts, Victoria said when I showed her the footage. That is more than enough for attempted murder charges, multiple counts. But we were not done yet. I wanted Nathan to have no escape, no way to claim innocence or point fingers at anyone else. I wanted him trapped. The plan we developed was simple but effective. I would confront Nathan myself in our home with the cameras rolling. I would give him the chance to confess. And when he did, the police would be waiting right outside. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Victoria asked. Confronting him could be dangerous. I looked at her steadily. This man has been poisoning me for weeks. He planned to kill me and take everything I worked for. I need to look him in the eye and let him know that I won. She nodded slowly. "Then we will make sure you are safe." I chose a Friday evening for the confrontation. Nathan always relaxed on Fridays, poured himself whiskey after dinner, and settled into his favorite chair like a man without a care in the world. I watched him do exactly that, the same routine he had followed every week of our marriage, and I marveled at how I had ever found it endearing. The cameras were recording. Margaret was parked down the street with a clear view of our front door. 2 police officers were waiting in an unmarked car around the corner, ready to move the moment Victoria gave the signal. "Nathan," I said, settling onto the couch across from him, "we need to talk." He looked up from his whiskey with a mild smile. "About what about us?" "About our marriage." His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "Is everything okay? You have seemed a little distant lately. Have I tilted my head, studying him. "I suppose I have had a lot on my mind." "Like what?" "Like why you have been putting poison in my food." The change in Nathan's face was remarkable. All color drained from his skin. His hand, still holding the whiskey glass, began to tremble. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. "I do not know what you are talking about," he finally managed. I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed play on a video. The footage showed him clearly standing in our kitchen, dropping liquid into my coffee cup. I watched his face as he watched himself commit a crime. "That is not," he started. "You do not understand." I swiped to the next video, him adding powder to my soup, then the next, and the next. 7 videos in total, each one showing my husband trying to kill me. "I think I understand perfectly," I said. Nathan set down his whiskey glass. His hands were shaking badly now. "Iris, listen to me. I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you have been slowly poisoning me with a cardiac glycoside, that you were planning to kill me and inherit my money, that you were going to run off with your girlfriend Veronica once I was dead." His eyes went wide at the mention of Veronica's name. "How do you—" "I have had you investigated, Nathan. I know about the gambling. I know about the debts. I know about the forged signatures and the second mortgage and the credit cards. I know everything." He stood up abruptly, and for a moment I tensed, ready to run. But he did not move toward me. Instead, he began to pace, running his hands through his hair like a man coming apart at the seams. "You do not understand," he said again. "I was in trouble. The people I owe money to, they are not the kind of people you can just walk away from. They threatened me. They said if I did not pay, they would. So you decided to murder your wife instead. It was not like that." "Then what was it like, Nathan?" I stood up, facing him across the living room. Tell me how you justified poisoning the woman who loved you, who trusted you, who shared her life with you." His face crumpled. "I did not have a choice. There is always a choice," I said. "You could have told me the truth. You could have asked for help. I had $17 million. I would have helped you, Nathan. I loved you." The word sat between us, heavy with meaning. Loved. Past tense. We both heard it. Nathan sank back into his chair, all the fight going out of him. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. As if on cue, there was a knock at the front door. I walked over and opened it. 2 police officers stood on the porch, their expressions grim and professional. "Nathan Walsh," the first officer said, stepping inside. "You are under arrest for attempted murder." "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched as they handcuffed my husband. Nathan looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading, but I had no sympathy left to give. He had used up all my compassion along with my trust. "Iris," he said as they led him toward the door, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I did not respond. There was nothing left to say. That same night, in a different part of the city, Veronica Hale was arrested at her apartment. The charges were conspiracy to commit murder accessory to attempted murder and several counts of fraud. She screamed obscenities as they put her in the police car, but no one was listening. The trial took place 3 months later. I sat in the courtroom every day watching as the prosecution laid out the case against Nathan. The videos, the toxicology reports, the financial records, the text messages between Nathan and Veronica, the testimony of Margaret Chen, who had documented everything with meticulous precision. Nathan's lawyer tried to argue that he had been coerced, that the gambling debts had driven him to desperation, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Nathan to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Veronica received 8 years for her role in the conspiracy. As the bailiff led Nathan away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one final time. I met his gaze without flinching. Then I walked out of that courtroom and into the rest of my life. With Victoria's help, I recovered everything Nathan had stolen. The house was mine again, free and clear of the fraudulent mortgage. The credit card debts he had racked up in my name were dismissed as part of the criminal proceedings. I did not lose a single dollar of my patent money. But some things you cannot recover. Trust, innocence, the belief that the people you love would never hurt you. Those were gone forever. The first few months after the trial were the hardest. I sold the house in the suburbs. I could not stand to look at the kitchen where Nathan had prepared poison for me night after night. I could not sleep in the bed we had shared, knowing what he had been planning every time he kissed me goodnight. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the city, a clean space with white walls and minimal furniture. It felt like a blank page, which was exactly what I needed, a chance to start over. But starting over is not as simple as changing your address. The trauma followed me everywhere. I had nightmares about waking up in a hospital bed, my heart failing from years of poison I never knew I was ingesting. I had panic attacks in grocery stores, suddenly terrified that the food I was buying might be contaminated. I could not eat anything I had not prepared myself for nearly a year. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Eleanor Webb. She had kind eyes and a patient manner, and she never pushed me faster than I was ready to go. In her office, I cried for the life I thought I had. I raged against Nathan for his betrayal. I grieved for the woman I used to be, the one who trusted easily and loved without fear. Healing is not a straight line, Dr. Webb told me once. It is more like a spiral. You will revisit the same pain again and again, but each time from a slightly different angle. And slowly, gradually, the pain becomes easier to carry. She was right. The nightmares faded. The panic attacks became less frequent. I learned to shop for groceries without hyperventilating, to eat at restaurants, without checking over my shoulder, to exist in the world without constant fear. I reconnected with my younger sister Sophie, who I had let drift away during my years with Nathan. She had never liked him, she confessed to me over coffee. There was something in his eyes that she did not trust, but she had not wanted to say anything because I seemed so happy. "I wish you had," I told her. "I wish someone had warned me." "Would you have listened?" I considered the question honestly. "Probably not," I admitted. Sophie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You would have had to learn this lesson yourself," she said gently. "That is how it works sometimes. The people who love us cannot always protect us from our own choices. My work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into a new research project, another cardiac device that could save lives and reduce costs. The work was demanding, all-consuming, and exactly what I needed. When I was in the lab, I did not think about Nathan. I did not think about the trial. I did not think about anything except the problem in front of me. A year after the trial, I joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. I had resisted the idea at first because I did not consider what happened to me as domestic abuse. There were no bruises, no broken bones. But Dr. Webb helped me understand that abuse takes many forms, and attempted murder certainly qualifies. The women in that group taught me more about healing than any therapy session ever could. They shared their stories, their struggles, their small victories. They celebrated when I made it through a whole week without crying. They held me when I fell apart on the anniversary of the night I saw Nathan poison my wine. 2 years after my husband went to prison, I stood on a stage at a medical conference and shared my story publicly for the first time. I talked about the patent sale, the poisoning, the investigation, the trial. I talked about what it meant to be betrayed by someone you loved, and I talked about what I had learned. Trust, I told the audience, is a gift we give to others, but we must never give it blindly. Love does not mean surrendering your self-protection. Love does not mean ignoring your instincts when something feels wrong. The person who loves you most should also be the person who would never ask you to stop protecting yourself. I looked out at the hundreds of faces watching me, and I saw my own pain reflected back. My husband tried to kill me, I said, and for a long time I blamed myself for not seeing it coming. I blamed myself for trusting him, for loving him, for being blind to his true nature. But I have learned that the blame belongs to him alone. He made the choice to betray me. He made the choice to put poison in my glass. The only choice I made was to love someone who turned out to be unworthy of that love. And that is not a crime. I paused, feeling the weight of the moment. Loving someone is never a crime, I repeated. But refusing to let them destroy you, that is survival. And survival is something to be proud of. The applause lasted a long time. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories, their own experiences, their own questions. I gave each of them what time I had. I listened. I validated. I offered hope. Now, 3 years later, I run a foundation that supports women who have experienced financial abuse and domestic violence. We provide legal resources, financial counseling, and therapy services to hundreds of women each year. My patent money funds most of our operations, and I consider it the best investment I have ever made. I do not know what the future holds. I have not dated since Nathan. I am not sure I ever will. The idea of trusting someone that deeply again feels impossible most days. But Dr. Webb tells me never to say never. The heart, she says, has a remarkable capacity for healing. Even a heart that has been broken. Even a heart that someone tried to stop. I think about Nathan sometimes, not with anger anymore, not with grief, just a kind of distant curiosity, like remembering a book I read a long time ago. He is serving his sentence somewhere in the federal prison system. I do not know where, and I do not care to find out. He is part of my past, a chapter that is closed, a lesson that is learned. The lesson is this: we cannot always control what happens to us. We cannot always see the danger coming, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose to fight back. We can choose to protect ourselves. And when someone tries to take everything from us, we can choose to rise up and take it back. I used to think that love meant trusting someone completely. Now I know that real love, the healthy kind, includes room for boundaries, for self-protection, for the wisdom to walk away when something is not right. Loving yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. It is the foundation upon which all other healthy relationships must be built. As I sit here in my apartment watching the sun set over the Boston skyline, I feel something I was not sure I would ever feel again. Peace. Not the naive, unearned peace of someone who has never been hurt, but the hard-won peace of someone who has walked through fire and emerged on the other side. I survived. I fought back. I won. And that is enough. So let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you overlooked the warning signs? Have you ever loved someone who turned out to be someone else entirely? And if so, what did you learn from it? Drop your answers in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar right now. And if you found strength in my story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and share this video with anyone who needs to know that they are not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And whatever you are facing in your own life, please remember this. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved. And you have the strength to protect yourself even when it seems impossible. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next story.